Off the top of my head, if I had to guess, I would say that at least half of the movies that we've reviewed for the Gamcast have had some variation on the finding Jesus makes you a better parent theme. I mean, Jesus is the cure for what ails you, so whether the protagonist is dealing with marital issues or an ethical quandary or a problem on a job or a sinful addiction to those godless vixens in the internet box, Jesus is going to swoop down and set everything right before it's over. But of the problems Jesus tends to fix in these movies, I'd say a solid 60% or more are parental in nature. And by the way, for some reason, every Christian screenwriter has the same vehicle for establishing a parent's absenteeism. It's always a cell phone. Somebody's always taking a business call instead of paying attention to the baseball game or asking how school was or something like that. And these screenwriters seem to have no concern for the actual importance of said phone call either. We watched a fucking movie where the dad was losing his business on the phone. Meanwhile, the kid's trying to tell him about a high score on some video game. And the movie would have us believe that his inattentiveness in that moment put him on pretty much the same level as Sybil's mom. Invariably, of course, the phonophilic parent will go through a Bible reading montage, angrily yell at God, apologize to God for yelling at him, and then smash their cell phone with a hammer or something to underscore the fact that paying attention to the baseball game is way more important than some, silly old steady income. And this is just yet another reinforcement of the parental guilt that sits at the heart of so much of religion's marketing. I mean, I'm sure that the pitch has gotten tougher since we all learned that church youth groups are rapier than cell block E, but the message is still ubiquitous. Good parents take their children to church, or at least drop them off at church and then don't ask questions later about why they're crying. Of course, most people watching these movies are grandparents, right? And most of their kids are having trouble parenting or having trouble in their marriage because that kind of shit's really hard. I mean, I've never done any parenting, but I've also never done any astronaut training, and I still feel confident saying that shit's hard. So the movie's trying to implant the message to Grandma to remind her son that the reason his kid keeps eating bugs is because he doesn't love Jesus enough. And for some reason, all the rape wasn't enough to erase this broad societal presumption that kids need them some churching. So even a nominally religious parent is predisposed to agree with this. So, you couple this meme with Grandma constantly telling Mom about this movie that she saw where the husband finds Jesus and stops hitting his wife and ignoring the kids and being a bad parent or whatever, and what you wind up with is a person convinced that Jesus is going to solve all of their problems, all the while, of course, they're ignoring real solutions. Real shit that could really help. Think about how fucking insidious this is. The people promoting this message are saying it's more important that we get some asses in the pews than it is that you or your spouse get psychological counseling or other forms of help that have actually been shown to improve parenting skills. Ignore your problems, read this fucking book, Jesus will take care of that shit eventually, and if he doesn't, it's because you didn't love him enough. I mean, at best, all this does is convince people that their interpersonal relationships can and will be taken care of by some outside force, that something other than hard work and dedication is going to fix their marriage or their relationship with their kids. That getting Jesus' forgiveness resets the clock on any psychological or long-term damage you might have already done through neglectful parenting or spousing. I mean, isn't that always the problem with religion, though? Basically all the issues boil down to the reliance on something that doesn't exist to solve a problem that does. And the more important the problem, the more dangerous the pretend solution. Now, of course, in the parts of the world that listen to podcasts, most of these issues have largely been mitigated. We still read the occasional story about some jackass parent treating their kid's diabetes with prayer or something, and granted, those stories are nowhere near as occasional as we'd like them, but by and large, people don't turn to their pastor for medical treatment anymore. Science and an improving social safety net has taken care of most of the former functions of organized religion, but even the more mainstream and liberal theists seem reluctant to hand over the reins of psychology. There's more to counseling than just nodding a lot and offering advice. It's a damn important profession for a lot of people, and offering up a non-scientific, non-evidence-based competitor to it would be bad enough even if the religious counselors were bound by all the same ethical rules as their secular counterparts, and of course, they're not. And all the while, religious adherents hide behind the, well, at least they have somebody to talk to defense or something like that, but that's insane. How many people with mental illnesses are slipping through the cracks because they're counting on their pastor to make the voices go away? And say what you will about psychological counseling, but at least it's evidence-based. At least bad ideas can eventually die. And if you think the same is true of religious counseling, I've got some Mormon anti-masturbation pamphlets you're going to love. Now, of course, even worse, the most basic tenets of modern psychology are entirely incompatible with the cornerstone of religious morality. Religious morality is prescribed. It's universal. It's full of thou shalts and thou shalt nots, which modern psychologists have learned are essentially the least effective way of encouraging socially acceptable behavior. And then, of course, Abrahamic faiths further complicate the issue by starting from original sin and telling people that they're inherently flawed and that they don't have the power to fix themselves and that they deserve punishment in hell and shit. I mean, you're not just keeping people away from effective therapy. You're exacerbating the problem. You're giving them anti-therapy. I mean, somebody to talk to, my ass. Your religion isn't a placebo. It's a poison.